Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Alpine Odyssey. We have finished the garage last episode, so this episode we are going to go straight into building the first bus station. Now, this station is going to be the biggest variant and maybe the most elaborate one. From my research a little bit into bus depots or stations for theme parks, or really any public service area, is that they tend to be rather minor, especially for such a small area in terms of population scale that we really have here. Like, the amount of parking that we have is probably nowhere close to a real actual park, so having all these buses is a little redundant, but I think it'll just look cool. And as I always say, the rule of cool kind of trumps everything at this point. So we are going to make a very smooth, concrete kind of path first, and this is going to kind of establish how big everything is going to be. And I'm going to go a little bit more modern with the design than I am used to. Modern isn't really my strong suit by any means, so it is a little bit more of a long process, a lot of trial and error until I get things right. And here initially, instead of just jumping straight into the structure, I figured getting a lot of the major footprint done is going to help propel me forward, because a lot of the times when you're doing creative builds like this, you can get discouraged if you are struggling. So it sometimes helps to start with something easier, and that kind of builds your confidence to keep going and going. And when you get to a difficult section, you can kind of look back at areas that are already completed, areas that are looking great, and you don't feel like you didn't get anything done. And that's essentially what I'm doing here. I'm trying some different things, trying to lay down some concrete, maybe inlay some lights in them, because the base structure is just not in my mind at this point. So we're gonna go ahead and try and make something similar to the upper areas that are above the parking garage, those awnings, but this one's going to be at an angle. I noticed a lot in cities and in places with bus depots, or at least large ones, they tend to be very flowy, so a lot of curves or a lot of angles on them, and they're very geometrical, so they just have this very modern art feel to them. So I wanted to try and capture that at least a little bit in my own kind of way. And we are going to do a lot of metal work, and it's going to be completely open air. And the reason is, these are technically, in my mind, supposed to be like windows above the people, to of course provide shelter from the weather. But since Planet Coaster doesn't do windows, we kind of have to do a skeleton structure as a framework and just leave it open. And that's just kind of what we have to do. So we're going to be mixing different materials here. We're using a lot of the smooth stone columns to get the base, because it looks a little bit shiny. It looks heavy enough to be a main supporting column. And then I'm using the nice I-beams, kind of girders, to provide some additional structural support in between these larger bits. And then in between those, we are using the railroad kind of rails to make additional skeletons that are a little bit thinner, a little bit different of a texture, and that way they just look a little bit separate to the rest of it. Now, this black colored iron, it looks a little too plain. It looks like straight out of your 50s, modern 60s. So we will end up changing the color of these to the blue that is to the rest of the garage. It is going to help tie everything together. I really like the use of this blue, and I'm going to try and tie this out throughout the whole parking lot and maybe some parts of the park itself. It is kind of the base that I use to structure everything else off of it. So you can see at this point we have the nice rough skeleton structure down. We have some arches forming. We have the base kind of framework forming. I still don't quite know how I want to web all the main structures together. I have these 30-degree juts just to make it look a little bit more dynamic and interesting. But in terms of getting that skeleton to merge with the main structure, I'm not quite sure yet. So I end up just moving on something a little bit more simple and straightforward so that I can, again, just stay confident, keep building things at a good rate, and that way, you feel like you're making a lot of progress, even though you may not be working on the main details. Sometimes it's good to just try and get something down rather than nothing. So at this point, I'm trying to establish and figure out where these two areas kind of merge, how they're going to connect. It looks like I'm going to have to make this little connection piece, and then the half circle is going to have to be flattened out near the top, and it's going to have to be kind of reworked and custom fit to these weird angles that we have established off the front end. And using these rail pieces to just tie that all the way down, and then these are going to be the cross members through the main supporting structure as well. Now, we are using one on top of another, very similar to what we did with the guardrails for the roadside, but doing this, it makes it look like an I-beam without necessarily being one, because you do get either the rounded on the top, or you can use the flat edge and have the smaller bit in the middle, and you can make kind of custom I-beams at different widths if you do something like that. We get some additional supports. I do want to end up taking these arches down and all the way to the ground. That way it just looks like it is tying the whole structure together rather than just the roof. And we are going to replace those rough stone columns with something a little bit well, not heavier, but to match the rest of the structure itself. Those rough ones wasn't looking quite right, and they're also a little bit bulky. And if everything else is a little thinner, it makes sense to use the correct material just to make sure everything matches. Now, this is a kind of T-junction area, and it can get a little weird when you are doing these kind of repeating patterns and like combining these barrel arched roof lines into each other. And cathedrals kind of run into this issue as well. You're gonna get these kind of weird creases going through, and the vaulted ceilings can be a little bit of a pain, but they do give a really nice open feel, definitely when you're down below. And the shadows they cast is very interesting as well. That's another reason that I wanted to leave it an open air structure, is we wanted those shadows to play along the sidewalk, because there's not a whole lot of detail in this area beyond just the skeleton of a structure, and the shadows kind of add a little bit of detail without me having to do any extra work in those areas. And it's kind of I wouldn't say it's a cheaty kind of way to get cool effects in there, but it kind of feels like that a little bit sometimes. We have some tall blue flags. This is the Blue Bus Depot. It is going to also feature a nice wide pedestrian kind of crosswalk over to that mid section to the other bus waiting. And I'm going to drop this with some white color just so it stands out a little bit more. It's a little bit more of a uniform shape, something solid rather than just these stripes. Here at this point, we're going to add some bike racks, and bike racks, just use the top of one of the small candy canes, and that's going to give you your nice little U shape that is going to be used to tie your bike down. We do need to maybe make a few bikes. I don't quite know how I'm going to do that yet. I'm assuming it's probably going to end up being a lot of icing, but we'll see when we get there. For now, I want to kind of focus more on vehicles. A bike is a little bit too small of a detail for me to worry about. Other than that, we're going to line the nice smooth concrete plaza area with the kind of flower beds that we've been having around. And it is interesting because we're going to have some awkward angles meeting together in these interesting shapes, and it's going to be a little bit different than most things that I make, but I overall enjoyed the way this all turned out, and I hope you guys do as well. I will be skipping over some of like the placing of bushes and flowers and things because I think you guys have seen kind of enough of that, but I will cover this. This is going to be I felt like the space was a little too open, so we're going to add a quick little, flower bed in the middle of the plaza, using one of the birch trees because they're kind of a nice thin tree that you can use there. And using that sandstone as a base, we can then eventually go in and possibly build a bench around that here a bit later. But first things first, let's establish the parking spots for the bus, and then we also need to probably label these. It took me a little bit of testing to get the label to sink in correctly. Apparently this ground isn't quite 100% flat, and you can see that even though I get it sunk in, only half of it gets sunk in right, and so we had to kind of make a custom smooth concrete pad just to get that a nice smooth surface so we can then inlay a sign. Now the problem with using a big sign such as this, they're going to be probably a neon sign. I might mess with some different sign types, but I wanted something really big, easy to read from afar, and we're just going to label these buses only. Just a minor little detail, and you can change the color of it just so it's maybe not quite as bright at night, because obviously letters just don't glow on concrete. That's not something you usually see at a bus station, I don't think. At nighttime, by the way, this whole place is lit up. It looks very beautiful. I added plenty of lighting here. It is going to be a nice place for guests to sit around, even though no guests will ever come over here. Here are the benches that we're going to wrap around the little flower planters, and it's just smooth concrete. I dyed it a little bit more of a dark gray, one, so it stands out from the flooring, and then two, so it stands out a little bit from the flower beds themselves, basically as a break and signal that these aren't the same. You can sit here. This is a different material, and beyond that, maybe just some wooden benches, because I can't really place the standard wooden benches here because there's no pathing through some of these areas. So kind of had to make my custom ones real quick, but these things get thrown together relatively fast and you can kind of copy and paste them around quick enough. Here, we're just finishing up a little bit of the structural elements that are left. We're going to take this partially down. It's going to end basically right there at the first set of staircases. You can see some of the staircases do exit straight onto this plaza, which is wonderful, and that's what I wanted to see in the long run. You want them to be able to access this area relatively quickly from the garage, and then if they are parked out front, they can just walk down that center pathway, which is just slowly getting filled in, and it's just looking really nice. We're going to add some street lights kind of as a little bit of a finishing touch, just so things stay nice and bright, and then a little bit more of a modern light going down the main aisle of the bus depot. I'm not quite 100% sure about this, but then again, I don't know modern buildings too well, so it makes somewhat sense, but also not really at the same time. Let's go ahead and take a look at the real-time section. You guys will be able to see in detail and give me some feedback. Alright, so here we are looking at the finished little bus station out the back of the parking garage. Again, these are kind of simple structures, very open, and just more utilitarian, with just a little bit of an art flair to them. So there's not much to go over. They just take a little while to make, especially when you do such a skeleton structure such as this. So what we got? We have some flower beds and everything like that along the edge of the building. We're going to start leaving gaps because we will want more naturalistic elements along the roadside, and after a while you just figure that they might have some open greenery. You don't want to have everything this detailed throughout. One, part count. Two, because it's just not a manageable situation for the maintenance crew or anything like that. We got our little bike racks down here, which I do want to make official little bikes eventually, but we'll have to get to that probably a little bit later. Plenty of lights kind of coming off the pillars, a few poles sticking up every now and then, plenty across this medium guardrail, just to keep this whole area kind of safe and different from the main road that the buses will actually be driving back and forth on. It's one big loop. I was thinking about making it a one-way road, just all the way around, so they have to make the full loop. But I figured that it might be faster if the bus just went straight from here to this depot and back, or straight from there to this depot and back. So making it a full loop with just a two-lane kind of road situation, I think, is a little bit more efficient for us. And with the completion of this smooth kind of concrete plaza, this whole thing is just being tied together and becoming a lot more weighted and grounded in a nice, believable way. The touch of green in the middle of the gray looks really good. Another bike rack over here to the right. The brown benches just on that crisp kind of sidewalk area here, which we have just going around the curb. People can stand in the middle here. It's not quite maybe wide enough, but I think it'll be perfectly safe. I did add some little message boards just around here. These are maybe like the little bus scheduler or things like that. This is just some custom shapes kind of embedded into one of the small square signs, and they just kind of display some minor information. Just because we don't have really small text to use, a large sign to me would have just looked a little weird. We have some additional seating back here, kind of towards the pathway. We also tucked in another little bike rack, because I wanted this whole area to be a little bit more utilitarian. Here at the end of this sidewalk, I do want to kind of tie this up with some shrubs, some light rock elements and things, just so we don't have this hard end. But that's just kind of a minor detail. I'm going to have to go in. We might touch that on this week's live stream or something. But you can see the sidewalk kind of comes and then becomes a U shape, and then you step underneath this large skeletal structure with plenty of lights down the main kind of thoroughfare, and then the lighting over on the branches is how you get the rest of it, and it works. It works out for us. In fact, when I show you the nighttime view, it will look pretty nice. Other than that, we get some more, benches and things over on the right side, access point into the parking garage, and just more garden space. I was thinking about making more awnings and roof areas over the seating areas to the left and the right, but I figured it would be too busy. So just having these open air plazas, I think, is a good look. Eventually, we will be building stuff out here. I don't know what yet. I'm thinking we do have about a quarter of, not a quarter, maybe 1/6 of the park kind of spaced out here. So staff parking, a lot more utilitarian kind of stuff. I don't know, but I think we're just going to end the parking lot right here and then come back to this spot at a later date. Other than that, we got buses on the roads, and they look cool. These are the buses we made. So let's take a look at nighttime, because I'm sure you guys want to see that. And it just looks so cool. Everything all lit up in here. You can see some of the red brake lights off of the bus, and they just really tie in this area. Luckily, the black text still really shows up on these signs at night, which is great. I was a little worried that they wouldn't show too well. But overall, I think we need to add some lights through this alleyway. It's a little dark and creepy. But beyond that, I think this little section is done. I hope you guys enjoy the looks of this bus station. We're going to kind of carry this look out through the two smaller ones, of course, in a little bit more of a simple fashion. But if you guys do have any feedback, do let me know in the comments down below. Leave a like if you guys enjoy Alpine Odyssey, and also subscribe if you're new and you want to follow the series as we progress from parking lot to park, and then workshop at that point. So, until then, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next episode.